And Oliver's back.
What's up, Buff fans? Go Buff Sports post-game show here, live from Folsom Field. Trent Finnegan, Harrison Simeon, Matt Spivak tonight. Instagram, go watch the YouTube. Go watch the YouTube. YouTube people, thank you for watching the YouTube. Buffs lose 31-28 to number 18 ranked Kansas State tonight. It was a thriller of a game, honestly. It looked like it was about to be over when it was 24-14 and Shedeur Sanders threw an interception midway through the fourth quarter. Buffs defense get a big 3-and-out, touchdown, get a stop, or get a pick. Should have been a pick six by Colton Hood. And then defense lets up a big drive, and then the offense can't capitalize. Drive gets killed by a false start penalty. Big topic tonight was injuries. Just got out of the press conference, and quarterback Shedeur Sanders said it was unreal how he didn't even understand how four receivers can get hurt in one game, and I don't blame him. Travis Hunter left with the shoulder injury. Jimmy Horn got left with an undisclosed injury. He took a big shot after catching the ball. Omarion Miller, who had a phenomenal game, he left with like a Dion said he was in a walking boot. He got hip drop tackled. He was the leading receiver tonight. He had 8 catches for 145 yards. He was phenomenal. And then Terrell Timmons, the NC State transfer, left late. He just had 1 catch for 6 yards, but it was a very important catch on their last touchdown drive on a very contested slant route. So, I mean, injuries are a name of the game, guys, but it's brutal. It's brutal when you're looking at your 7th and 8th receivers on the game-winning drive.
Yeah, I mean, when they're almost all to the same position group, that's going to really sting you. And we saw, those guys step up. Colton Hood taking over for Travis with the big interception on the tip drill, almost brought it all the way back. We saw Draylon Miller have a nice performance. Marion Miller looked to be the guy that was going to step
So
up
good.
in Hunter and Horn's absence, but then he ended up getting hurt, and then Timmons comes in and gets hurt as well. So it's going to be really interesting. Obviously, there was a question about Cordell Russell, how close he is to returning, the TCU transfer. So he could be possibly added to the fold, depending on the length of these injuries. But overall, it's really tough to bounce back. With that many receivers, and when you have a guy like Travis that plays on both sides at such an elite level, that is brutal.
And before Travis left with the injury, Kansas State did a good job of limiting him. He only had 3 catches for 26 yards tonight. Obviously, a season low, only 6 yards after the catch as well, which that's where he does a lot of damage as he's so shifty on the outside. Great job tackling by Kansas State. And that's going to push me into my next point, tackling and this run defense. Matt, where should we start with the run defense, with the tackling? What stood out to you tonight?
Well, DJ Giddens, 182 yards, 7.3 average. That's not what you want from the opposing back.
That's ridiculous. That's
Yeah, I mean, 7.3 yards a carry on 25 carries. He was a workhorse, he was still efficient, still so efficient, and that starts with the second level tackling, which was just not good at all.
Should we acknowledge it?
Yeah.
First game back, Shiloh Sanders was not good. We'll say that. He got sent to his knees a couple times on juke moves. head coach Deion Sanders said he played horrible. He was rusty, and Coach Prime was definitely right saying that. And one big thing that doesn't get talked about on that last drive, not having to do with tackling, on a big play, Avery Johnson found Jace Brown on a slant. Jace Brown for Kansas State had 6 catches for 121 yards. But he hit him on the slant on this RPO, and the RPO was so open because Shiloh Sanders over-pursued the slant way too far and then just left a wide-open alley down there. But the tackling everywhere was poor. Giddens was very patient, almost Le'Veon Bell-esque when he was running. He forced a lot of missed tackles. And yeah, you just can't arm tackle an elite running back like that. And Colorado's going to see more elite running backs. One that comes to mind is Ollie Gordon when Oklahoma State comes to town. And it's tough. You know, this run defense has been so good. These linebackers have been so good recently, and then they just didn't come to play until the fourth quarter tonight. And you can't beat the number 18 ranked team in the country if you don't start showing up till the second half.
Yeah, we saw how little room there was for error, and when the Buffs seemed to finally have the momentum, huge response in 2 really big chunk plays from the Wildcats that set up Brown with a huge touchdown down our near side, and it had Hodge kind of out of his element on the outside corner
because of the injuries.
Yeah,
should be
really
Travis
was due to those injuries, and then a big wheel route that Giddens brought to midfield. Again, just the busted coverage showed how little room for their error. Those mental mistakes hurt the Buffs and made the difference tonight.
Yeah, it was tough. And Avery Johnson, like he played a solid game. He only had 224 passing yards, but so much of it came on that final drive when the Buffs were lined up in kind of that one-on-one man coverage on the outside. And it was tough, but, you got a next man up mentality. Like we were saying, that Colton Hood interception was phenomenal. Great run back. Should have been a pick six, but he tripped on Preston Hodge. Yeah, and then if we turn to the other side of the ball, Shedeur Sanders he was 34 for 40 with 388 yards and 3 touchdowns. If I told you that, you're like, wow, like how would they lose this game? Sacked 6 times, and then he threw an interception. He airmailed an interception in the red zone, partially because of the pressure in front of him. Center Hank Linkus was getting blown up all night. On that interception, Sanders couldn't step into his throw, just kind of noodle-armed it, airmailed it way over his target. But the 6 sacks, you can't have that. You can't have that. You saw it against Baylor, you saw it against Nebraska. When you let up 6 or more sacks in a game, you just kill so many drives, and it's just not a recipe for success. And this offensive line was brutal tonight, all 5 of them.
Yeah, no, I mean, in some of those sacks, you saw Sanders – it kind of ended up worse than it could have been. I mean, you had times where he would try to keep making plays and trying to scramble out of it, but just couldn't. I mean, credit to Kansas State for, as Sanders said, being very disciplined on the edge. Didn't allow too many times where Shedeur was able to scramble, or what he's known more for is extending plays and finding downfield receivers. Sometimes that was able to happen, but for the most part, Kansas State bottled them up. So, yeah.
And yeah, the pressures Kansas State was running, they used all season long. They've just been blitzing 4. Tonight they had 3 down linemen for most of the night, and then they would blitz their linebacker. They would twist him around, twist him into contain, and so many times Sanders, when he spun out, and like against Baylor where he would spin out and then he'd buy himself an extra 4 seconds, he'd spin out and there'd be a Wildcat defender just sitting there waiting for him. It was great. It was a great scheme by Kansas State's defense, but it didn't seem like Shedeur really adapted to that until late. I mean, we saw there was 6 sacks, but there was a grounding penalty or 2 in there as well that was because of a sack, so we just tried chucking it away. And then the offensive line, too, the run game. We're not going to count Shedeur because Shedeur Sanders technically had negative 50 rushing yards tonight from the sacks. He gained 24 yards and he lost 74 yards. I don't understand why college football still counts sacks against rushing yards, but for the running backs, Dallin Hayden, 7 carries, 11 yards. Isaiah Augusta, 3 carries, 10 yards, 1 touchdown. First touchdown as a Buff. And then Michael Welch, 0 carries tonight, 0 receptions either. We only really saw him on kickoff and a couple snaps early in the game. We said it earlier, like, you have to establish the run game. And Shedeur said, oh, well, when you're behind, you can't run the ball because it chews up clock and whatnot. What are your thoughts on that? When you're down 10, like, are you fully anti running the ball? Or
I mean, this team, they weren't down like multiple scores for a long period in this game. They were down 10 at one point, and there was still at least over a quarter to play. So running the ball is still very much should be in their game plan at that point. And yeah, 10 total touches for, or not touches, but 10 total rushes for all of their running backs is just not going to get the job done.
Yeah, no, I mean, you mentioned Micah Welch, no carries, and what we've seen from the run game that really helped them was that they didn't go away from it. They got creative, but there wasn't really the creativity that we've seen the last few games from Colorado. And when you only have 3 carries from your leading rusher heading into the game, and then Hayden, you'd like to say he's the most talented back on the roster,
Mm-hmm.
and then Welch provides so much explosiveness as well. You have 3 guys that are talented. Coach Prime has acknowledged it over and over. They have guys that can run the ball really well. It's not necessarily on them. So when they went away from it so quickly that it kind of put them at a disadvantage of just pure scheme. And when you have a team that ran the ball as effectively as Kansas State, you have to be able to counteract that no matter how much time it takes off the clock.
Yep. Yeah, it definitely is tough to see. And like you said, the creativity, recent weeks, we've been seeing Pat Shurmur scheme up a lot of different styles of runs. Tonight it was just mostly zone concepts, and Kansas State was eating the Buffs' offensive line alive. I mean, every single play it felt like the offensive line was pushed back at least a yard instantly. It was tough for those running backs to get anything going. The longest carry of the night from the running backs, Augusta's long was 4, and Dallin Hayden's long was 3. Shedeur Sanders had a scramble for 13 yards, but designed run, longest carry of the night being 4 yards, that's not going to do you any good. I mean, I'm just going to laugh it off because it's so –
I mean, it's a record. It's
so
a program
bad.
record for the least
program record, negative 29 rushing yards. The previous record was negative 27 rushing yards.
And it's
so.
really, really a shame because you saw the momentum going towards the Buffs building a sustainable run game. We had over 100 yards against UCF, which is a defense that was built to stop the run.
Yep.
And when you have a game like this, it just sucks the energy out of that running back room. I mean, you had so many players that had great stories. You had Dallin Hayden, who came and talked during media availability about how the run game had improved. And to see that happen, especially with so many receivers down, is just kind of disheartening.
Yeah, definitely disheartening. And now the big thing with the receivers down is you got to look at next week. You're going at Tucson against the Arizona Wildcats. And they lost to BYU today. They've had a weird season, a little underachieving, if you could say, based on how people voted them in the preseason. But they still got Noah Fafita at quarterback. They still got Teteroa McMillan at wide receiver. This is a very good team. And playing a road game. It doesn't matter if you're playing Alabama on the road. It doesn't matter if you're playing UMass on the road. Missouri kicked their butt on the road today, but point stands. Road games are tough. It's hard to win on the road in college football. And it's going to be a hot game, and if this team isn't healthy, it's going to be a tough one to win. So just quick preliminary thoughts on that game. What are you guys thinking in Tucson next week?
I mean, we just talked about it. They need to give this running back room at least 20 touches. I mean, you throw it out to them on screen passes. You just need to get them more involved, especially with your top 3 receivers being out. Coach Sanders and Shedeur both talked about the next man up mentality, and they're really going to need that from some of these younger receivers, but also just feeding their running back room is really going to help them.
Yeah, no, I mean, our Arizona as a team is kind of built structurally similar to Colorado, and we saw against the pass-heavy offenses of like Colorado State, the Buffs really thrived, but they were able to thrive because of turnovers, and only one turnover tonight, which was arguably the biggest moment in the game, had Colorado have won. So I think turnovers will once again be a factor. This is a tough game that now the stakes are really raised, as the Buffs, are trying to keep kicking towards a bowl game, and you lose 2 straight after the momentum that was built up by the Baylor Hail Mary game, and then UCF, you kind of almost go back to square one. You still maybe have a winning record, but you have to think of it as we're about to play some really, really good football teams, so we can't let this get out of hand unless, sooner or later, before you know it, this could end up like last year.
Yeah, and like they have Texas Tech on the road, which was supposed to be a pretty winnable game at the start of the season. Texas Tech is a damn good football team now. That's not going to be an easy game. They have Utah here at home. It's so weird what the Big 12 has been doing. That game looks easier than it does. It's still a challenge. Still Utah. I'm not trying to say it's a cakewalk, but it looks easier than it did in the preseason. Oklahoma State looks easier than it did in the preseason. At Kansas looks easier than it did. It's like there's still a positive outlook, but Arizona and then Texas Tech. They play Arizona and then Cincy. My apologies.
Yeah.
And then Texas Tech, and then they have a bye, and then it's Texas Tech. But
you need a win in these next 2.
You need a win in these next 2, and they're still very alive in the Big 12. They still only have 1 conference loss. You lose to the best team in the conference, there's nothing to be ashamed about there. There's nothing wrong with that. Obviously, in the way that they lost tonight, it's going to be depressing no matter what because of what happened on that final defensive drive and then what happened on that final offensive drive and just having no weapons available. So, but yeah, it's going to be fun. That game kicks off on Fox at 2 p.m. Mountain Time next week from Tucson. Do you guys have anything else to add from tonight's game?
Yeah, no, I think there's always plenty of stuff you can kick yourself about after a loss. Though, if you told me Travis Hunter went down, very early on, and so did half the receiver room basically, and so did, Travis Hunter being the top corner is always hard. So, if you told me all that, and then you told me then that we lost to the best, arguably the best team in the conference by 3 points, and had a chance to win in the final minutes, I wouldn't be too disheartened. No. So, it's not a brutal loss. Obviously, it's a close game, so there's stuff like, woulda, shoulda, coulda that you can point out and be like, this is what the Buffs could have done to win this game, and it isn't even that much. But still, you have to look at it a bit positively. If you curve this regarding the injuries, the Buffs looked pretty much dead in the water going into that fourth quarter.
Yeah, there was no energy in the stadium, and they revived it really fast.
Yeah, and to be able to pull off that touchdown drive and then the interception, being able to take the lead late, and on that touchdown, the Kansas State had to take the lead at the very end. You kind of just had to tip your cap. It was a spectacular catch.
Through the contact, pass interference, and he still makes the catch, breaks the tackle, and trotted in the end zone.
So yeah, I think overall it's a tough loss. You got to come away with it. Plenty to improve on, but there's still definitely life in this team. You saw it from the crowd tonight. You saw it from every corner of the roster. You saw Travis Hunter still being out there, being a leader for his team, even though there was, as Coach Prime said, no chance for him to come back into it. So there's still life in this team. And that's my takeaway.
Definitely.
I mean, everybody knows this team's gonna come out and they're gonna throw the ball and they're gonna succeed in that. Everybody knows that about this Colorado team, but it's really what they can do in the trenches going forward. How can they stop the run and how can they run the ball is what's gonna be the deciding factor. And if this team makes a bowl game or if this team can go farther than that, it's really all in the trenches. Kind of the same as last year as well.
Yep, definitely agree with that. So that's all from Folsom Field tonight. 1:15 in the morning here, 3:15 on the East Coast for those East Coast Buff fans. Gotta love an 8:15 kickoff on ESPN. Game lasted 3.5 hours tonight, and I thought it was going to overtime. That would have been even crazier. Would have been later than that Colorado State game last year. But yeah, for ScoBuff Sports, I'm Trent Finnegan.
I'm Harrison Simeon.
And I'm Matt Spivak.
Thank you guys for tuning in, and we will see you guys next time.